Everybody, we're going to reconvene here with the CEO of Reputation.com and our own John Hines, who's been working really tirelessly on these reputation management issues. We talked a little bit at the third quarter meeting internally about reputation management as a field, and that's really where this idea came from. We're going to be looking to work with folks like this good client to look at potentially doing some sort of a gathering, a symposium later in the year on these issues, because I think a lot of the topics we care about come together in the reputation management world. So, John, if you could introduce our speaker, and here we go.
Yep, thank you, Mark. Cynthia mentioned in Europe a move to allow people to be forgotten, and really what we're talking about today harkens back to a New York Times article that came out July of last year, I think, called "The End of Forgetting." Hopefully the initiative that Cynthia was talking about in Europe gets some legs. The end of forgetting is really about the fact that the internet is viral, it's transparent, and what goes on there for all intents and purposes may be permanent and infinitely searchable. We're getting a okay. I just want to show a slide that relates to the problem of the legal context, and in many ways how the law, at least right now, is a very weak tool to help those people who are disparaged or who have problems on the internet. And the title of the slide, Challenges to Making an Online Speech Claim, begin with the speaker. The speaker itself. Oftentimes you can't get the speaker. Forget online claims. In the United States, the First Amendment has priority, and there are many difficulties in making a speech claim that begin with a statute of limitations, an abbreviated one-year statute of limitations in many jurisdictions. The pleading requirements are often onerous. You have to plead special damages. There are many defenses that make speech cases difficult. So frequently, you can't get the speaker legally. Oftentimes, you can't find the speaker, and if you think you've located at least the ISP in which the speaker is operating, there are huge burdens, legal burdens, to obtaining the identity of the speaker, again, based upon First Amendment considerations. So frequently you can't get the speaker. Then there's the source sometimes, the source of the information. The speaker gets certain information. The speaker's posting information on a blog, for example, or a website or on a social media site, and gets the information from perhaps another source, or the site itself gets information from a source. Well, now we have cases going both ways, but many authoritative sources that say that blogs are newspapers. And so we have now the reporter's privilege, which makes it difficult for us to, as lawyers, to get the speaker and then to get the source of the information. Okay, so speaker, source, and then you say, well, let's get the blog. Let's go after the operator of the blog. Let's go after the operator of the website. Let's go out after the operator of the social media site, and that's the big kahuna. But you can't get the carrier because we have the very, very powerful Communications Decency Act in Section 230C1, which I've quoted above, and that statute purportedly was really enacted to encourage the free flow of information and self-regulation, which gives a kind of immunity to those intermediaries that carry the content of third-party information, even if, and this is crucial, even if they know that the information is violative of other people's rights. Congress felt we want to be very, very liberal in allowing carriers of information to be immune, or we won't have an internet. And so when you add that all up, can't get the speaker, can't get the source, can't get the carrier, at least as a matter of law, we have our ways, but it's very, very difficult. We frequently have to think of other tools, technical tools, and go to people who have the understanding of the internet, who have the understanding of tools to help us think about how we can minimize the impact of communications that hurt our clients. And that's when we turn to guys like this, to the folks at Reputation.com. And I want to just say now introduce our speaker, Michael Fertik, and say a few words about Reputation.com. Over 80% of consumers turn to the internet to research professionals before engaging them. And Michael is going to actually talk about reputation generally as a problem that affects all of our clients universally, but we're privileged because he's going to zero in a little bit on and look at the problem of reputation through the prism of our own profession as lawyers, which makes it a special treat. We can extrapolate, we can internalize what he says for us, but we can also extrapolate it for our own clients. So over 80% of the consumers turn to the internet to search professionals before engaging them. A difference of 1 star on an online review site can mean a 9% change in revenues. People judge you based on the appearance of search results, not on the quality of sources presented. Old news, defamatory remarks, and misleading search results can easily cast your legal career in a negative light. These are the issues that CEO Michael Fertik set out to resolve when he founded Reputation.com in 2006. Reputation.com is the global leader in online reputation management and digital privacy protection. Credited with inventing the space, Reputation.com offers powerful reputation management tools and proprietary technologies not available anywhere. The company is endorsed by the ABA and the AAJ and featured regularly in the mainstream press, including the New York Times, CNN, Time Magazine, and others. In 2011, Reputation.com was named one of the 30 most innovative tech companies in the world by the World Economic Forum in Davos and won several other awards for excellence in technology and customer service. Reputation.com has over 1 million users in 100-plus countries and is backed by top venture firms including August Capital, Bessemer, Venture Partners, and Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. So, my name is Michael Fertik. I'm going to speak at this level. I'm going to assume that you can hear me. I'm going to try to address the camera. And if you can't hear me, please just wave. I'm very glad to be here. And thanks particularly to John Hines for inviting us. I don't get to give this presentation myself anymore. Very often, actually, this is the first time I'm giving this presentation, and I was reading it in preparation for this meeting, and I think it's a pretty good presentation. It's actually pretty compelling. So I hope I do a good job of delivering the presentation. Laura is here to make sure that I don't trend off message too much. The topic is reputation management and digital reputation management. I have 29 slides. I understand that we may be able to get some CLE credit for this session, which is terrific. I think that's something we've been able to do. So I'd be happy to take questions during the discussion or afterwards as you'd prefer. And I think that you have a hard copy of the presentation that you may leaf through as I go slide by slide. I'm going to press this button. Okay, good. So some life vital statistics about the company, Reputation.com. We're a venture-backed company. We've raised $67 million in venture in 4 rounds. We closed our D round in the summer of this year. We sell into 2 markets: the consumer market, where we have we're over 1 million users across the world, and now 3,000 enterprise customers. We have 2 different teams that sell into the 2 different markets. One focuses on consumer, and one focuses on enterprise. And because a lot of the business that we get that I'm going to describe today comes through, let's say, high-touch channels, whether it's a law firm or a wealth management firm or a consulting firm of some kind, or PR or boutique communications firm. We are set up to have a dedicated team that is specifically trained and accustomed to working with clients who are referred through those channels and with that kind of touch. I've also written a book on this topic, which, by the way, does treat the CDA 230 in some large measure. It's called Wild West 2.0. It was an Amazon bestseller. Can you imagine that a topic like that became an Amazon bestseller?
And it's worth reading.
Well, thank you. It's definitely worth reading. And I will send you signed copies if you would like. And by the way, I went to law school. I went to Harvard Law School. I clerked for the Chief Judge of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, Danny Boggs. And it was during that clerkship that I started this company. I didn't launch the website till after the clerkship ended. But that's my own background. So there's definitely a kind of a legal thought process and DNA in the company as we think of ourselves. So, okay. So, yeah, this slide says that we are extremely awesome, and that is true. And it's been validated by a lot of people. Just so long and short, we've probably been covered in national media once a week or about that for several years in the United States, and then a little less often, maybe once every other week in some European country. And then some of the cool awards on the right hand of the slide indicate what we do. Hitting this again. Okay. So what is online reputation? So the internet is now the source of all the information that people care about, and it's the source of all the information that people care about at almost every level of decision making, whether it's consumers looking for information about other individuals going on dates or employment, or purchasing decisions from vendors, whether they're service providers or corporate vendors. The internet is the source of information. All of the data are very clear. They indicate conclusively that people at all levels, and I'm sure everyone in this room does it, look for information about third parties on the internet and then rely on that information to make decisions. So those are both two important pieces of it. It's not to say that consumers or individuals or corporate decision makers learn about a topic on the internet. In fact, traditional media, word of mouth, traditional sources still dominate awareness building in, again, almost every vertical of life and profession. Traditional marketing is still the dominant way of learning about a topic, but then validating your information, developing an opinion about that topic, and then making a purchasing decision or making a business decision all relies on the internet. And an internet reputation is the concatenation of all the different inputs that are available from different sources on the web, and they change rapidly. We propose that there is such a thing called as a reputation economy, where a reputation has now eclipsed the concept of brand, and a reputation is the first and foremost component of a business and of a service provider. The Economist Intelligence Unit says that 75% of a company's value is tied up in its reputation. 75%. Profit, I believe it is, says that the number one risk facing companies today is reputation risk, and that companies that have an excellent reputation, not as scored by us, but as scored by the Third Party Institute, companies that have an excellent reputation have 100% higher shareholder returns than their competitors, and more than 100% shareholder returns better than the S&P 500. So it's a very critically important component of what's happening. We're also seeing an interesting shift in the corporate world that may affect your clients. We're seeing that the CEO suite is taking over the topic of reputation, that 81 of the largest 150 American companies now have a dedicated budget for reputation. That is not brand, it's reputation. 81 of the largest 150 American companies, and of those, half of those companies report that the CEO office is managing reputation directly. All of the companies, or virtually all of the companies that report that they have a budget, are increasing that budget, and half of them report that reputation is taking a higher priority within the organization than advertising, corporate communications, public relations, or government relations, or social media. So reputation clearly is taking on its own standing very rapidly in the last few years because of the internet. And the reason we believe this is happening is that every component of a company's valuation can be affected now willy-nilly by the internet, right? The CEO is responsible for everything, not just product image, but also corporate image, corporate history, corporate provenance, workplace conditions, salaries and compensation. All of these are now topics of free-flow discussion, sometimes truthful, sometimes untruthful, on the internet. I travel the world doing this business now very frequently, and I can tell you that basically companies all want, except in China, all want the same thing. They want truthful, comprehensive, up-to-date, accurate, relevant information to appear when people look for information about them on the internet. They don't want a skewed image that is either too favorable or very unfavorable. They don't understand why an offhanded remark by a former disgruntled employee or a competitor masquerading as a blogger, they don't understand why that will dominate their digital reputation. And all they want is a fair shake, basically. And they understand, as I'll show in the course of this presentation, they understand the punitive power of an outlier remark that does end up appearing very prominently when people look for them on the internet. So we make the claim that online reputation is often, no, that's not true. I take the word often out. Lara, make a note. Online reputation is always more important than brand. That is our claim. And then we have a very obvious and vivid example of what happens when a company may get a reputation that it may deserve. I'm trying to avoid editorial. Blackwater, until recently renamed as XE Services, was then renamed again Academy, or I don't know, we don't know how to pronounce that yet. It's about a week ago. And it's a security firm, a government contractor, and either if you credit them with being good actors, either because of the bad acting of a small group of people in that company, which then started to brand the company generally, or because of an institutional failure of the business, the business either got the reputation on the internet it does deserve, or it became associated with the bad acts of a very small minority of the people in the company and a very small number of acts in the company. But clearly, it became a topic of some disaster on the internet, and this became a meme on the web. And I use this as a kind of a very, very vivid outlier example of what can happen to a company that doesn't manage its reputation actively. Maybe a more neutral example would be of none of the companies I describe in this slide are clients of ours, by the way. And if they were, they would not look like this. One of the more neutral example would be Domino's Pizza. You may have seen some of the discussion on the internet that arose from a couple of employees at Domino's Pizza filming themselves putting snot in the food and doing other really nasty things in the food, and filming themselves and putting it on the internet. And this has become a total disaster for Domino's. It's persistent. It persists in being a disaster. They don't know what to do. The chief marketing officer of many of these companies still treat these as marketing problems and brand problems. They still think that if they use the heavy artillery of television and kind of social media, something or other about social media, Twitter sphere, digital relations, something that they say, that they'll be able to solve the problem. They don't know how to solve the problem. They don't understand that these are problems of technology that are rooted in technology and need to be solved through technology. But you see how quickly and very rapidly the internet can take over a reputation. And it's very devastating when they do. All of the data show that internet reputation affects companies very heavily. HBR just had this terrific study recently, just a couple of months ago, showing that the average impact to top-line revenue of 1-star difference on a review site for a business is up to 9%. So compounding that to 2 or 3 stars, it can be very devastating. This is consistent with the finding that we have had over now almost 4 years of selling the products that are relevant to this discussion, in which our customers tell us anecdotally that a negative piece of content appearing on page 1 of a search engine about them, a negative piece of content appearing on page 1 of a search engine about them will result in a 50%, that's half, 50% drop in new business. So that's what's super relevant. New business seems to disappear. Repeat customers are not as affected by negative content on the web unless it's of a certain type. But more or less, the kind of business that will disappear, tends to disappear quickly, is new business. It's very difficult sometimes for some service providers or vendors to admit to themselves the impact of the content that is negative on the internet and how impactful it is, because they don't get a phone call from someone saying, hey, I was about to do business with you, but then I saw this tweet, or then I saw this piece of information on a complaints discussion forum, and therefore I'm not going to call you. They don't bother calling you and telling you that. They just don't call. So you have to, over time, observe in aggregate what the change of new business behavior is, and it seems to be about 50%, and that seems to be a consistent anecdotal refrain from our customer base over many data points over years. People who did sign up with us or people who did not sign up with us seem to say pretty much the same thing. And very importantly, people believe what they see on the internet, and they believe whether they see it, irrespective of the source. And the rates at which they believe it are growing very rapidly. One data point stands out in my mind, that in 2010, a survey of consumers said that they relied on a certain type of review channel. This is just an illustrative type of data point. A certain type of review channel to the tune of 67% of the time, and in 2011 it's 89% of the time. So only in the last 18 months we've seen a radical increase in the number of people who really rely on the internet. We know that upwards of 80% of people have decided to purchase, to verify, validate, and confirm a purchase decision they were going to make, or review a purchase decision they were going to make and decide not to make it based on the content they found on the internet. And again, the data are very consistent. This goes from small purchase decisions of light bulbs all the way to multi-million-dollar deals, all the way up the chain. We know this is true now all across the chain. And we know this is true in every part of our lives. We know that employers have rejected candidates about 70% of the time based on content they found on the web, and that's true in the US, Europe, US, UK, France, and Germany. There's a study that Microsoft did last year and published. We know that 98% of recruiters in that same study look somewhere on the internet for information about candidates, and 32% of them look not just on the search engines, but 32% look in virtual worlds. I mean, just think about how deeply they're searching. Do you know how dorky that is, a virtual world? I mean, we live in Silicon Valley on the internet, and we live in technology, and we still think that a virtual world is a very dorky place to look. And they're looking very, very deeply at us for information. So it's important not to imagine that if something is a kind of a little, sort of something is very prominent in a place that's more obscure, that it will not affect you. Okay. I want to give one more data point just from my memory. So about 90% of consumers will rely on information they find on the internet for a purchase decision. And I love this one. About 3/4 of consumers say it's very important to look up information on the internet and rely on it before making a purchase decision, which means that 3/4 of people say that it's important, but 90% do it, which means that even people who don't think it's important still do it, which is remarkable. Okay, so one thing that's important not to imagine is that this is the biggest mistake that people make when they think about the internet, is they think that because they are good and decent people who do a good and decent job in a good and decent profession, the internet will think that about them. That is not true. It's consistently not true. We take, for example, some public services attorneys here, and we see that this person, we don't know Lori Cruz, we don't know what the truth about her is, but we know that this person has absolutely no control over what people say about her on the internet. And what we can see is that this fact pattern right here on the slide that you see here is strongly suggestive and strongly redolent of a fact pattern we see often, which is basically one person does not like this attorney. One. Exactly one, not more than one. But certainly not less than one. So one does not like this person, and this person is being targeted by somebody who has a little bit too much time on his or her hands, and is going to undo this person's entire professional career. We've seen this happen to attorneys inside firms, outside firms. We've seen this happen to law firms. We've seen this happen to law firm offices. We've seen it happen to clients. It happens more often to clients than to law firms, but you see how it happened. And you see how the person who's doing this is seeking a friendship and alliances in the internet. This person is seeking to find other trolls and is seeking to find other people who will join his or her fight against this attorney. Now, sometimes it's possible that that attorneys get what they deserve. It's possible that attorneys are sort of caught up in litigation. As you know in your world, and you know your profession very well, there are attorneys who act badly, and there are attorneys who act very well but are truly collateral damage. We see very often in large labor disputes, the law firms get highly targeted by the counterparty in the labor dispute, and the lawyers get called out by names. This is extremely painful for the lawyers who do business by their professional names. It's also painful for the law firms. Sometimes, of course, there are lawyers and law firms who do act badly, and that may be reflected on the internet. The internet has a number of different strongly representative different use cases. But this person, in this case, this person seems to share a name with another attorney, unfortunately, because this person is not accused of any problem, this Timothy Thurman, but is unfortunately harder to find and is associated closely with the Timothy Thurman who is accused of some misbehavior. Again, if you have any kind of frequency of hit rate for your name or representation, this kind of thing can happen. Has anyone seen this visualization before? This is a very powerful visualization. It's not ours. It's created by third parties. What it shows very clearly is how important the very, very, very top results of, for example, in this case, search engines actually is. So you see that this is a heat map of where human beings actually focus their eyeballs on page one of search engines. And you see that the red area is most intense, and then the yellow less intense, and green less intense still. What you notice is that more or less the first 5 results are all powerful in determining a person's reputation or a company's reputation on the web. And about 90% of users do not go beyond page 1. These are very clearly and distinctively consumer numbers, by the way. These are not corporate numbers. In your field, you will look, I'm sure, every day past page 1, page 2 of a search engine in matters of discovery, in matters of regulatory compliance. They'll look through several pages of results. They don't look much past it, but they do look very frequently beyond page 1. But the average consumer and the average purchasing decision maker for the average corporate decision will not look past page 1. And that's a very important fact. It's also important to note that journalists, with great respect to the profession of the Fourth Estate, journalists do not look past page 1 very frequently, and therefore, if your clients are in the middle of a dispute of some type, but they're also in a multi-billion-dollar or $100 million business, and they don't want every journalist who calls them about their business also to feel obligated to ask them about the relatively minor dispute that is facing the company right now, then what they want, a good solution is to have that discussion not disappear from the web. It's basically impossible, but to move past page 1 so that it doesn't come up every time a journalist calls the company for any type of discussion. We know now from a lot of the behavioral psychology studies that have been published that there's a high appetite to believe what people see on the internet. If you ask people in a prompted fashion, do you believe what you see on the internet, the answer is often no. In fact, the data are remarkable even for Wikipedia. The best survey I've seen show that only 30% of people who use Wikipedia believe it is very accurate. Only 30% of people who use Wikipedia believe it is very accurate. By the way, just interesting anecdote for those of us who are scientists in the room, if you use Wikipedia for science topics, hard science topics, it actually is pretty darn accurate. But it is perceived, apart from science topics, as being not very accurate. 70% of people think it's not very accurate, and yet we rely on it all the time. And then let me follow the syllogism. If you ask people if they believe the internet is very accurate, they actually believe it's less accurate than Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is more accurate than the average internet. But we rely on the average internet every day as well for decision making. So the important thing is not to ask whether people rationally believe the internet's accurate. It's how they actually behave when they have no time and when they get a sense of smoke when there are many fish in the sea, many vendors, many lawyers, many firms, many decisions to make in real time in every part of our lives. And we see that they behave as if they believe much of what they see. This is true since the days of page 6 and now on the internet. And they also tend to gravitate towards gossip. I don't think I'm saying anything totally totally novel, but we know now from the data that are available on the internet that it's definitely scientifically true that they gravitate towards gossip, and it tends to affect the digital reputation of people who are either wanting to be found or not wanting to be found. So you see here on this page a representation of searches for Rick Perry. Rick Perry is a presidential candidate in America. We may or may not like this person, but what is clear is that the internet thinks that he's gay, and or wants you to think that he's gay, and that's because there has been some discussion on the internet as to whether he's gay. And the first suggested search, the first prompted suggested search that Google offers you is not Rick Perry, presidential candidate, Rick Perry, Texas, Rick Perry, governor, Rick Perry, nice person, bad person, Republican, whatever. It's Rick Perry, gay. And we can decide whether we like this person or not. We can decide whether we think this is just or not. But again, it's just an example of what can happen to businesses all the time. My company has discovered what we believe to be a definitive understanding of the algorithm that determines a suggested search in Google Suggest and Google Instant. We have solved this problem. We've cracked it. We believe we're the only people in the world who have. It took a while to do it. Google Suggest and Instant is a reasonably new phenomenon. We had to act quickly because what's happening is that not only are people finding stuff out or finding content about a candidate or about a topic when they look the topic up on the internet that the topic itself, the company or the lawyer may not want them to see first or foremost, but also now the search engines are suggesting things that you find, and that process of suggestion becomes a self-fulfilling do loop in which the content that you did not want to have appear first now increasingly does because of the reaction to it of the consumer. This slide tells us that the internet is making reputation a more important topic, and I think that's obvious. Okay, now what do we do about it? I like this slide. Truth is at the next exit. Okay, so I'm going to describe what we think we've learned in high level as to what the best practices of internet reputation are, and share them with you. I think you'll find many of them to be very common sense. One thing I want to tell you is we've probably put to the tune of about $14 million in real R&D. I don't mean like web development. I mean real R&D over the last years, about $14 million into as deep an understanding as we possibly can make as to why certain content shows up over others, how to solve these problems. We're not an SEO company. We're not a search engine optimization company. In fact, we're not terribly good at search engine optimization in many ways. We've hired outside search engine optimizers for our own stuff. We're not a law firm. We're a technology firm, and our core strength is science. It's not even engineering. I think we're good engineers. I think we're excellent scientists, and that's really what we spent a lot of our time doing. We've now been granted 2 patents by the U.S. Patent Office, both in the last few months. We've got another pretty thick pipeline that we've been building up for years. Finally, the patents are starting to issue, and they have to do with reputation, they have to do with digital privacy, they have to do with digital information management, and so forth. So some very important principles that we found that apply in almost every case that sometimes are counterintuitive, sometimes are commonsensical. The first thing that I think you probably tell your clients all the time in many parts of their lives and businesses is that prevention is better than repair. It's always less expensive. We found that preventing a problem of reputation costs between 1/10 and 1/20 of what the repair actually costs. It's almost difficult. It's sometimes difficult to get our clients to understand that and to accept that. And they call us when they have a problem, and we say, look, it's a $200,000 problem or a $500,000 problem. And they say, well, you told me. Well, we said, look, it was $20K when it was prevention, and we were clear about that. And so often prevention is much less expensive, and let me explain why. If you can build up a kind of an insurance layer, I'm using that phrase loosely, if an insurance layer or a prophylactic layer of content that is truthful, relevant, authoritative, comprehensive, and up to date about your company or about your law firm or about your topic in advance of a problem, then the likelihood that that content is pierced or that prophylactic layer is pierced by unwelcome content is radically reduced. And even if it is pierced by unwelcome content on the top of search engines, the top of Twitter feeds, and so forth and so on, the likelihood that Google thinks it's more important after a week or two is also radically reduced. So if you understand why search engines treat certain content as more important than others, and if you prepare accordingly in advance, what you can do is you can own the information about you, build up this sort of insurance layer, and make sure that that disgruntled employee, that labor dispute, doesn't actually dominate the information that appears about you when people look for you on the internet. Prevention is so much less expensive. The next bullet describes what we call empty search. There's no such thing really as empty search about almost anything. There's no such thing as an empty search result about almost anything that Reed Smith or you as attorneys individually would ever touch, right? Your clients are already on the internet. You are already on the internet. What we refer to as an empty search result is effectively a very weak search result. It means that it's a kind of a random avo remark, or a random avo empty posting, or a listing, or it's a random empty posting from a marathon that you ran a few years ago, or it's a local news article that seems to quote you about something that is no longer germane to your professional life, or no longer germane to the professional success of the business that you're representing. So if you have no control, you're literally very vulnerable. And the most important thing that we have to teach our clients and prospective clients is that just because you think you're kind of okay now, and just because you're really a terrific person offline, is not correlated to whether the internet will think that and whether you're safe and secure on the web. When you do engage with the internet, it's important to engage with multiple types of sites. It doesn't mean that as a law firm you need to engage in entertainment websites or discussion forums about movies, unless your field is movies. But being involved in the internet in multiple types of conversations, or multiple types of listing sites, multiple types of directories, multiple types of discussion forums, is of high valence and high value when it comes to giving yourself prophylactic cover. Now, when you do have a problem, one of the toughest things to do is avoid looking at it. A lot of us as attorneys are trained to address problems head on, fight problems head on, research the problem head on. We're going to share it with your 30 associates, the site, and make sure that you understand and capture and screenshot every posting on every site. Maybe you want to address and redress certain grievances that you have that arise because the site is commenting you and lambasting you or your client. These are almost never good ideas. There are only very, very narrow exceptions as to when you should respond to a very highly critical blog. The only time you should respond, we believe, after many years of doing this, to a critical piece of content on the internet is when two conditions, and both conditions are fulfilled. One, the content is already highly visible. So it's already something that's getting a lot of traffic, and I mean a lot of traffic that in a way that's proportional to the traffic that your topic or business would get anyway, right? Disney will get more traffic than a small auto parts maker. So whatever's a lot of traffic for your field is already very important. If it's not getting a lot of traffic, doesn't matter what they say, probably should not touch it. Number two, second condition that needs to be filled.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes.
Our lawyers frequently are, particularly in litigation, are having to look, and repeatedly look at sites.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendation as to how you handle that?
Yeah, so if you have to look at a site, and some people professionally must, it's a totally understandable thing. It's useful if you can, and sometimes it's logistically not possible. Let's just take this as a heuristic. It's useful if you can to designate one person and one person only, or two people and two people only, let's just say, to look at the site at intervals that are necessary and needful for your business purposes. And if you can, to look at that site from an IP address that's not within your firm. So to go to Starbucks and to look at it on this may be too much of a pain for you guys to do, but it's not that difficult to do that. The next sort of Jedi level step that you could take is you could buy some very inexpensive anonymizing software, which is freely available on the web. It's fully legal, it's fully ethical. And then the IP address from which you would surf would be randomized. But it's probably not a good idea to put a link in an email and send it out to your colleagues to get their opinions too. If you can, take screenshots, print screenshots, whatever you need to do, just to avoid giving the site too much traffic. Now, why do I say this? It used to be in the 90s that traffic was the number one governor of whether content would show up high in the search engines or low in the search engines. That has not been true since the 90s. It has not been true that site traffic or clicks have been one of the top governors, but it's still relevant, it's still material. And many of these sites get so little traffic, or get so little traffic from certain geographies, that a very temporary spike from a certain geography, or a very temporary spike at all, will yield all of a sudden an opinion by Google or a finding by Google that this site has taken on more importance. And so you want to be mindful of the impact of even a small amount of traffic on what could end up being a compounding problem for the site. Is that helpful? Is that responsive? Okay. So the number one condition that must be fulfilled if you're going to respond to a piece of content is that it has to be already well visible before you touch it. And the second thing is it has to be saying something absolutely false. So if they say, I'm going to use a very easy example, that the store that you operate closes at 7 p.m. and does not have herring, but you are open till 10 p.m. and you're famous for your herring, then you should say, thank you very much for your very insightful comment, you jerk. Don't say that. And you say, we are actually open till 10 p.m. and we do sell herring, and these are the varieties of herring we sell. Even if those two conditions are fulfilled, if the site is snarky enough and nasty enough, it's still advisable not to post the content. You may have to post the content elsewhere, but a lot of these guys are looking for a firefight. They have all of the advantages. The architect is another topic for another time, but fundamentally the architecture of the web is totally geared towards leveling a playing field between Walmart and the consumer. The problem is that when two people are relatively equally situated in terms of their power, the attacker now has much more power on the web. So be very, very, very careful about it. There we go. The last bullet here is important, and it's one that is just coming online in terms of its value and its power, and it's relevant also to a product that we offer that I'll tell you about later, is that online review collection needs to be a proactive part of everybody's business. If you're in business, which all of you are as attorneys individually, as Reed Smith is, as Reed Smith's different offices are, as Reed Smith's many clients are, all of us now are subject of reviews. It's not just relevant to restaurants, it's not just TripAdvisor for hotels, it's relevant for every place. We are all being reviewed, and if you're waiting to be reviewed by somebody, then you're probably waiting to be reviewed negatively, okay? If you look at the behavior of consumers and of all types of consumers, they basically don't review anything except experience entertainment positively. So restaurants, hotels, movies are the only topics, more or less, that people bother to review positively. It's very uncommon for people to say, oh my God, I just talked to this guy, John Hines, and he's just fab. And I just love his office, and I love how he talks about the law. And they're just not going to take the time to do that on the internet, right? But they should, because he is fab and talks about the law in different ways. What you need to do is you need to engage with your clients. People are starting to behave this way on LinkedIn. LinkedIn seems to be an unreliable source of reviews. People devalue the source of reviews on LinkedIn, chiefly because there's often a trade in kind for reviews. It's important not to give incentives for your clients or people in your lives or your customers' clients, your clients' customers to review. You don't want to pay them for it. If you just ask them to do it, and you just say, look, could you please do it? They often will, and that way you get a truthful, balanced, comprehensive, up-to-date, relevant picture of where you are. Okay, other things to do very importantly and very quickly for all of the attorneys in your office immediately do not pass go. All of your clients do not pass go is to purchase today your firstname-lastname.com and many similar permutations of it. So michaelfertik.com, michael-fertik.com, mfertik.com, fertik.com. Those are the types of sites that you'd want to purchase immediately. And if someone else shares your name and you have that person owns johnhines.com, well, you might still be able to get john-hines.com, et cetera, and so forth. And you should. If you're being a little bit more deliberate about it, which I think any of your clients should be, and I believe also as Reed Smith should be as well, and Reed Smith's attorneys probably should be as well, there's a list of, let's say, less appealing URLs you should also buy just in case and just prophylactically. So you should say, forgive my language, first name, last name sucks, first name, last name liar, and so forth. And you want to buy those because the reason you want to buy those is that the search engines, very simply, this is a well-known, well-characterized feature of search engines. Search engines care a lot about URLs that have the topic that people are searching for in them, literally in them. And this has been extremely disastrous. This omission has proved very costly for companies and people who have not chosen to do it. If you want to do a kind of a light job on an average person's basis, this will cost $100 to $200 per year. If you want to do a good, thorough job, it's about $3,000 per year, which is not a lot of money for a law firm, not a lot of money for a client. It may be a lot of money for an individual, but you can at least get some backup. There are many, many, many famous and disastrous examples of failures to protect yourself. Most famously, Del Hell is probably the best one. One blogger basically raked Dell over the coals for many years because he thought that Dell's customer service was not very good, and we can agree or disagree as to whether that was true. But he bought DellHell.com, and guess what? Dell was just feeling the pain, and still feels the pain in many, many ways years later. For yourselves, I think that you want to make sure that you're actually using the profiles that are available to you. I think many lawyers with whom we talk secretly hope that Avvo and Martindale will never actually discuss them, right? They're never actually going to get talked about there. They somehow, buy, borrow, steal, copy, whatever, the openly available source information from bar associations all around the world, and we kind of ostrich. We hope that, no one's going to come along on Avvo and talk about us on Avvo. That's not a good and healthy approach to these types of sites. You want to claim your site. You want to curate it. You want to make sure that people are saying things about you, or at least that the proper, correct information is out there about you on these sites at a bare minimum. And a little bit of curation, this is my field of expertise, that's my field of expertise, will go a long way. And there is not a correlation between engaging in owning those pages and generating negative content for those pages. So some people have the secret fear that if I acknowledge this site, all of a sudden the one person who hated me I got divorced from is now going to appear on Avvo and start dominating my life. It's not true. You want to make sure that you have some control, and the best and healthiest thing for everybody to do is to start to engage in positive reviews. It's not hokey, it's not salesy, it is tasteful. There are tasteful ways to do it. Always when I talk to high touch professionals, one of the secret fears they have is it's not tasteful, it's not, it's hokey, it's bad taste, right? I'm sure the guys in London are probably saying, yeah, that's us, we're worried about that in particular. Even in Silicon Valley, they worry about it too, or are worried about being hokey. It's not hokey. You also want to have a very easy and light touch, just a social media presence. You don't have to tweet all the time about where you got pomegranate juice. You don't have to tweet all the time about what you're doing. But just have a social media presence where you claim your URL. You want to say at John Hines, or at John Hines Reed Smith, or at lawyer John Hines, whatever. Have your name and your handle, and just have it. You might want to tweet once a year just to have it and have it active, and that way that'll show up nice and high in the search engines. And what that does is it gives you a piece of property. It gives you a piece of real estate in your top 10 results that you'll care about. Similarly with LinkedIn and Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook. Facebook, you may just want to just not touch it very often and not post on it. You do not want to trust privacy settings on any of these sites. LinkedIn in particular, let me say that again. Do not trust privacy settings on these sites. And your kids should not trust privacy settings on these sites. Full stop. There's no debate. LinkedIn, you want to go to LinkedIn.com. You want to make sure that, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are on LinkedIn. You want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile, your URL, does not say linkedin.com/54&321. It should say linkedin.com/John Hines, or whatever version of John Hines is left. If there are other John Hineses in the world, that will show up nice and high in the search engines. These are basic housekeeping things for attorneys to do, and there are analogs that you can imagine for law firms. I should tell you that my company does this for many clients, but if you want to do some of these things yourself, these are basic housekeeping things you should be doing for yourself. I think that I picked up at the beginning of our conversation, or just before our conversation started, that there was some in-house marketing team here that was talking about blogs and newsletters. That's helpful. As individuals, you can do that kind of stuff as well. You don't have to commit to a lot of it. Updating your stuff once a week is wonderful, but once a quarter is also fine. One thing you do not want to do is copy and paste content among your different peers, right? Google is the best pattern recognition machine in the world, or Bing is, whatever. The search engines are the best pattern recognition machines in the world. If you copy and paste content, every instance of that content will be punished by the search engines, so that they will actually have a deleterious impact on your social presence, on your search presence, instead of an advantageous one. All right, so some just basic housekeeping. I think I've covered this. Make sure your profiles are filled out. don't ask for it. You can ask for good reviews, but you don't want to offer incentives, right? You want to ask people who you know are going to give good reviews. You can ask for good reviews. I don't think that's right. And you want to make sure that you are. If there's a content of a review site that's not snarky but just constructive, okay? If there's negative feedback on a review site that's constructive and not snarky, you may want to say thanks very much for the feedback and very excited to get the feedback, and we'll work on improving it, right? It doesn't take a lot to make that pay off very quickly on the internet. It's quick to do. But again, that's not a snarky site or a snarky comment. You want to make sure you're differentiating. Okay, so this is the special slide for the law firm. What about libel litigation? I think that you will know more about this than I will, than our firm will. But we can say that in the age of the internet, even from the UK, where libel laws are so powerful, and we get a lot of business. I'm surprised at how much business we get from the UK, because in the UK, the libel laws are so powerful in favor of the person who's making the claim, but they can't control the internet. So you can get the newspaper to pay you a fee, you can get the newspaper to take down content, but already now it's in 1,000 places around the web, and you can't control the search engine. So there's still this desire to clean up the search engines. Litigation in behalf of a client is not a typically successful approach when it comes to unwelcome speech on the web or unwelcome publication on the web. Have you heard of the Streisand effect? Well, I'll tell you about the Streisand effect. The Streisand effect is named after Barbara Streisand, who is has been a singer, and she has a very fabulous house in California, in Southern California. And paparazzo of some kind took a picture of the house and published it on the internet. I don't know the full details, but the long story short, took a picture of the house, published it on the internet, and she was not happy. She said, look, this is a violation of my privacy. She called her lawyer, natural thing to do. Lawyer sent a cease and desist, a takedown letter, and the blogger who published it, or the photographer who published it, I don't know exactly who, told all of his 500 friends, and the photograph appeared in 500 places within 24 hours, right? I'm truncating the story. But you understand that this has now become called the Streisand effect, in which there's blowback, active blowback against the celebrity or against the high-profile person after there was an honest and effort through litigation, traditional methods, to remove this content. I can tell you that you as experts will understand the difference between certain kinds of sensitivities from a straight PR perspective versus other types of sensitivities, right? In a very high profile dispute where there is a kind of active social media discussion of the dispute, it may be less wise than on average to use litigious techniques or litigation techniques, because there will be a very unsympathetic response by many voices who will make this costly for you and your client. If, on the other hand, there's like one guy who's using a trade secret or from one of your clients and is violating your trade secret, you may send a nasty letter and say, take it down because you're breaking the law. And he or she may post a letter, but it's not going to get a very sympathetic response if the letter is worded correctly. So it's not to say that litigation never works or litigation techniques never work, but you do have to sort of judge it differently. And also, very importantly, one thing that we've seen is that the most successful instances of litigation, when they're used, and I normally advise against them, with great respect for attorneys and attorneys' techniques, I normally advise against them. But one technique that seems to work in the narrow set of cases when litigation is advisable or may be advisable is the talking indictment. So Rudy Giuliani became very famous for basically beginning every indictment by saying, it was a dark night in November and the drizzle came and then the hatchet man came and chopped the guy on the head with a hatchet. And it became a very dramatic kind of talking indictment, and the newspapers would pick that up and use that and use the phrasing and use the iconic imagery that this indictment had in their publications. If you have a letter, you should plan on its being published on the web and plan on its being a kind of talking indictment for the web, saying, look, you worked here for this amount of time. You stole our information for this amount of time. You were well treated by the client. We understand that you're very sympathetic as a human, but we believe this is bad judgment and you're violating the law, forthwith. You might get one or two unsympathetic comments, but most people looking at that will see that as something they will understand, and they will feel that this is a trade secret that has been stolen from your client by the perpetrator. Okay, so just think of it that way. In this case, just to give you a very, very vivid example, 3 years later, after this backlash, the British Chiropractic Association, which we know very little about, but we assume is a reasonable and responsible organization, still is dominated by this very negative association, and they don't have the tools in their view, it seems, to repair it. So should you fight back with your own comments? What's the advice you give your client or yourself? Again, we've covered whether you should talk about respond in a nasty blog. Almost never. Yeah, I think basically that I think we've basically covered this slide. If there's further interrogation on it, we can get back to it. All right, this is my favorite part of the presentation, where I suggest very strongly that you buy our products and spread our products into the world as attractively as you can, and as much as you can. I just want to linger on each of these slides a lot. So I'll tell you about the products that we have, and each one in total will just be in series will be very brief. Each one. We do offer a series of products that solve problems of the type that we're describing. And I got to say, even 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, and I did say on the record and very publicly in many places, that there were a lot of things that you could do yourself to solve these problems. Even 2 or 3 years ago, I was saying that. And I stopped saying that about 2 years ago because I came to believe and understand that the problems were multiplying so quickly, that the problems of technology that were causing these pain points for our clients were looking more and more like antivirus or virus, where you can't tell the average person, even the average very smart person, go build your own antivirus software. So I stopped saying you should solve this stuff yourself. I do think there are prophylactic things you should do yourself or hire us to do. But even so, if you've got a problem, I think it's time for professional help. That's my point of view. So what do? We have a few solutions that I think are very germane to you and to your business. On the left-hand slide here, it's a product called Reputation Defender. This is the flagship, well-baked, well-understood, well-characterized, well-developed product that just kicks ass across many countries and many scenarios. We've been selling it for 4 years. At scale for 3 years. It's the typical workhorse solution that will work for attorneys, for your clients, and so forth. This is the product that will just dominate search results prophylactically or in a repair scenario for your client. We will move content that is unwelcome off page 1. We have rules as to which kinds of content we will work on versus not. We have rules as to what kind of content we will publish. We do publish content if we have to for our clients. We do it with the permission and active review and oversight of the clients. We prefer even not to publish content if we can avoid it, because publishing content requires that we write content, and as technologists, we don't like to write content. We prefer to hire machines, not people, and the margins, of course, are better for the technology than for the publication of content. But still, one of the tools that you can use on top of the science that we built is the publication of content, to make sure that we create a link infrastructure, more or less, that's very powerful for our clients. And that's what Reputation Defender does. It's a very, very powerful, well-characterized tool. It begins at about, I guess, $1,000 and goes into the many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what kind of problem you've got. The average lawyer spends $2,000 per year on this product. So it's not all that terribly expensive for an average lawyer. We do also sell into law firms, which then pick up the price at a discounted rate for the entire or for the bulk of the partnership or for all the associates as well. That's the workhorse product. Reputation.com for Business is very exciting to me. I hope you'll be excited by it. We launched it just a few months ago. This is the product that solves online reviews. It does not delete or purport to delete or seek to delete any review that is negative. It simply is a place for you to aggregate all of the reviews and all of the places where your business is reviewed around the internet. Get a dashboard that shows you how you trend versus last month, how you compare to everybody in your field, how you compare to your competitors that you can select or deselect, and also to invite reviews in a very simple one-click fashion from your clients and from your customers so that they can improve your reputation. This is working for any number of different verticals. For the medical vertical, I believe we're already fully HIPAA compliant. It's a pretty awesome tool. It's our fastest growing product right now. There's a version of it, I think, that will also interest you. I think that we may discuss it on the next slide, but just in case we don't. This version of it that you see, Reputation.com for Business, is a product that is designed for your average small business or your average attorney. If you want to have if you're a franchise, or if you're a law firm, let's say you're a franchise, I'll just depersonalize it. If you're a franchise, you're KFC, and you want to see how every one of your stores is doing across the country, there's a digital map that allows you to drill down to every location and compare your region to region, compare your manager to manager. It just seems to be a terrific tool, and there's been a long demand for it because reviews are increasingly powerful for clients. My privacy on the right is a bit of a different kind of product. That is literally about your PII, your personally identifiable information. This is our most widely distributed product. It's $100 a year. There's a white glove version of it that's a couple $1,000 a year. But the average consumer spends, I think it's $99 per year, $98 a year now on this product. And what it does is it removes you from the databases that have all your personal information. And if you are a lawyer involved in any kind of dispute and you don't want people calling your house or publishing your personal information on the web, this is a kind of a no-brainer product for you and your spouse. It's pretty seamless. It's pretty easy. People have been using it now for years. It's the fastest selling product, I think, through AOL in the world. We are going to be in every branch of Compass Bank. This product also sells through Wells Fargo. It's just a great product, and it's kind of our consumer workhorse. So there's some more stuff that I got into here. Organic search remediation on the left-hand side is the enterprise version of Reputation Defender. This is the version that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the version that if you have a big client who's got a major issue, we will repair your problem. And also, this is the kind of thing that will solve the Google Instant or Google Suggest problem that I've described. It's bankable, it's good, it's easy, good track record, good customer sat. This middle one is, again, this drill down map that you can see that allows you to drill down to every location, every office, every attorney, every franchise to see their reputation and compare it. And then Executive Privacy Plus is this kind of white glove version. We're selling this into a lot of the banks today. Many of the banks are under intense public pressure due to the 1%, the Occupy Wall Street stuff. Some of the protesters with whom we may or may not sympathize, no comment there. Some of the protesters seem to be targeting individual bankers by name, finding their personal information on the internet, which is extremely easy to do, and then publishing and making very, very, very visible indeed, which we've also seen happen to high-profile attorneys. Okay, other things that we want to tell you as attorneys about what we do and what we don't do. So are there standards in the ORM, the online reputation management industry? Not really. There's no regulatory. There may be eventually, but there's no regulatory. We as a company built an organization called the Online Reputation Management Association because we found that there were people who were copycatting, and that's okay in some measure. But we wanted to make sure that we were identifying the vendors that we thought were behaving ethically. We saw some nasty behaviors. We saw some people who were using the technology or techniques of search engine optimization to say nasty things about competitors. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting sort of good practices established so as the industry gets built up, people could sign on to a set of ethical practices. We're not going to attack anyone. We're not going to help anyone who's under criminal prosecution or serving a criminal sentence. We're not going to lie for anyone. We're not going to create fake reviews for anyone. We're not going to do certain things that seem probably pretty simple and obvious when you think about them and ask about them, but that we had to articulate in a public and clear way so as to define the space properly. All right, some frequently asked questions that we get from attorneys. So if a lawyer makes a mistake and a client blogs about it online, can you push it down? Yes, of course. We're not in the business to cover up bad actors, and you know, there are many people who make mistakes. There are many people who have a bad day, have a bad incident, and that's fine. That's different from a consistently bad actor, and we try to differentiate and not work with the bad actors. And I think we do a reasonably good job of that. I believe so. What about unflattering pleadings or court orders appearing in the search results? Yes, we can solve those problems. Some of the things that appear most prominently and are stickiest in the internet are piece of content that show up on government websites. Again, we'll never seek to remove it from the web, but we don't know if you've been in business for 30 years and there's a pleading that's in a civil proceeding that's on a search engine and it's the second result that people see about you. We don't know why that has to be the second result that people see about you. So we may help move that to page 2. Again, it's stickier, it may be more expensive, but it is totally doable. My online reviews only reflect my failures and none of my accomplishments. Well, hopefully that's not true. All of the people in this room and all the people who are watching, all the ships at sea, are clearly very high-achieving people, and so are your clients. And there's no reason for all the amazing things that each of us has done in his or her life shouldn't be reflected on the internet. So sometimes it requires a little bit of work. Sometimes it requires engaging with your clients to make sure that they actually do publish content. But that's the best way. The best way is not to wait to be caught off guard by a negative review. If your client wants to hire you, how do you handle client confidentiality? So we have pretty strong, pretty standard confidentiality agreements in place with many of our clients. We also have channel agreements in place for multiple client agreements that are pretty standard and easy. What has come up? Basically, unless we're ordered to by a court, we will not reveal information about a client. That's basically our standard line. If there's a particularly volatile topic, we may ask to, and if we're expected to resist the effort to reveal client information, we may ask the client to pay for that resistance in terms of counsel, and that's normally understood to be okay. But I don't think we've ever had a leak in the history of our company. So we've got a pretty good history with our clients. And the way we fulfill, by the way, is reasonably confidentiality protecting. So at any given time, there's only a limited number of people in my company who will know the identity of a client. And the way we fulfill much of the work is piecemeal, so that even if you are working on a client case, you may not know that you're working on that particular client's the case for that particular client. You may not know the identity of that client. Only a small handful will have to know the identity of that client. So you have to get the client's permission for a reputation issue affecting both lawyer and client. Yes, we do if the client is really the person we're working on. If our customer is the lawyer, then the answer is no. Sometimes the lawyer's reputation is caught up in the client's reputation, and if the lawyer is paying us for the lawyer's work, then the answer is we can do work for the lawyer. But if we're doing work about the client, then we need the client's permission. We won't do it without the client's permission. By the way, we have often been hired by the attorney so as to maintain maximum privilege. I do not know that privilege has been tested yet in the last 3 or 4 years. So it is not something that we can represent as reliable, but we are hired by attorneys frequently so as to maintain maximum privilege if it is tested.
And just a note on that, in the materials, you might want to check Sandy Thomas's article, which will give you some insights with respect to consultants generally and with respect to the kind of work that Michael's company offers.
Terrific, great. So there may be scholarship on that already. And this one comes up a lot with attorneys, this final bullet. How does Reputation.com comply with the regulatory requirements that govern clients? This often comes up in the financial services sector, which is highly regulated. Financial services companies may not be able to make certain representations about themselves publicly and are very concerned about controlling their voice on the web. We never publish content unless it's approved specifically by the client or by their counsel. So that's part of our typical process. And generally also, as we'll see in a style guide that I'll show you in a slide or two, we have a pretty modest, when we do have to write content, which we try to avoid, but when we do write content, we don't use purple prose. We say very vanilla in our content. We have factual content. We don't use hyperbole. We never make non-verifiable statements. We basically follow Wikipedia type rules, which is the claims we make have to be verifiable and sourceable somewhere else. And still and nonetheless, the client has the opportunity to review all of the content. This slide is a representation of a kind of a style guide that we have internally for our clients. We have an editorial process for our clients. We score our writers when we have to publish them. We score them. Writers who consistently score poorly are trained or terminated, and writers who consistently score highly are rewarded and kept. And also we have developed specific expertise over time writing for certain types of industries. So people who are consistent at writing well for financial services and get good client feedback are consistently put on financial services projects and healthcare and biopharma and law and medical and so forth and so on. We will never attack anybody. We are asked frequently to get into the business of attacking third parties for huge sums, and we have refused. I'm sure at some point there will be some business in the world that does that, but it will not be us. Okay.
Michael, just
Are we running out of time? Yeah.
I just want to tell the group, because just for our CLE purposes, we need to give a code word because we have folks participating virtually.
Oh, I see.
So I just want to offer that up for anybody who has a meeting they have to go to. Obviously, we'll continue until we're done. The fancy code word will be privacy. I was told it had to be easy to remember and easy to spell. So Cynthia in London, that's privacy. I don't want y'all to misspell it. So if y'all have that, we can continue. Sorry.
Great, and I'll wrap up soon. And thank you very much for staying so long and for participating, to everybody. So what will we do? We will engage for a client to repair a problem after a legal proceeding has finished. We will assist in repairing or fixing a reputation when litigation is not appropriate or not going to happen. And there are cases in which we will actually help when litigation is in progress, but we have to review a little bit more carefully. There are times when we will not work or tend not to work for a client. We especially are allergic to criminal proceedings against a client or against a prospective client, although there may be some jurisdiction in which it may be possible, but we tend not to do that. We tend not to try to cover up a crime, all right, especially if it's a major felony or a violent crime. That's kind of something that we have a hard time feeling comfortable doing. Inside our company, we do have a committee of people who review tough cases on appeal, and that committee is comprised of people, a majority of people who are not working on a commission, because we want to. As far as I know, we've never actually granted "quote unquote" an appeal. We normally try to play it safe. We will not create a fake entity to divert attention from the entity that is being discussed. So some people, let's say, John Johnson. Let's say a John Johnson has engaged in some very unappealing behavior and wants us to create a different fake John Johnson to call attention away from this person's behavior. We will not do that, and we will never publish negative content about anybody. We'll never go on the attack. That's it. This is another slide that gives some cover stories that talk about us. But that's. I'm so grateful for your time. I hope that was helpful for you and instructive and useful. And thank you for hosting us today.
Thank you for joining us.